We're going to be speaking in Chinese today, and so I'd encourage those of you who don't speak Chinese to put on your earphones, and we'll have interpretation for you. We're going to be discussing today China's industry and the transformations taking place in the Chinese business context over the past 30 years of development, and then the 10 years or so since the financial crisis. We have seen China go from an agricultural industry and economy into an industrial economy in the 80s and 90s, and then in the early 2000s, upon entering the WTO, China became the world's factory. Now, in particular, beginning around 2008, 2009, China's economy started moving towards services. In particular, industry, or the industrial sector, as labor costs and land costs and an aging population have put pressure on the industrial sector. It's important to achieve industrial upgrade, and we need a new economy to meet new conditions. And we have representatives of the new economy here, who I will introduce in a moment. And I'd like to begin by asking Vice President Long from the Development Research Center of the State Council to talk to us about, when we talk about transformation, what are we transforming towards? Thank you very much. I think if we observe the changes in the Chinese industry, we see a number of dimensions. First dimension is a change in the factors of production, and that is the most significantly human capital, labor. And as it was just mentioned, population aging and changes in the quality of workers. Now, from a global perspective, we're seeing these changes very profoundly. As emerging economies join the global competition, we see the advantage in cheap labor reduced and eventually upgraded in emerging economies. Now, we also see an increase in the middle income class in China, which leads to higher levels of consumption and demand. And as it was just mentioned, an increase in the service sector's role in the economy, a greater desire for higher quality goods, safer food, entertainment, such as the film sector, which is taking off. And then the third dimension that I would mention is changes in technology. New technologies are going to bring many changes to our society. The new economies of on-demand, for example, DD, Chuxing, which changes the way we get around. And a lot of these changes are going to be determined by the market, are going to be tested by the market. Lots of startups, a lot of ideas, a lot of business models, new service models. What we mean when we speak about the new economy will be tested and tried in the market. Now, I also think we're going to see changes in our competitive advantages. As I mentioned, our labor advantage is reducing, and our export advantage is shrinking. Now, we are importing 1/3 of our primary products. So moving forward into the future, we should look at how other countries have risen, for example, the Asian tigers or Japan, moving from manufacturing, where they established their global competitiveness, and then moving towards more capital and technology-intensive sectors. We are seeing a great growth over the past decades in service outsourcing, service contracting. And I believe this will show great promise for China, service outsourcing. Now, an important aspect of all this is reform. Recently, the State Council put forward a document on promoting civil aviation that requires reform across hundreds of thousands of airports across the country. They need to be a general, not civil, general aviation. Regulation, or lack of reform, has stifled demand in these areas for a long time. Now, these demands need to be tapped. And this could, in China, create new industries that may exist elsewhere, but for institutional reasons are going to be fairly new in China. And that's a part of industrial upgrade. And of course, as some industries rise, others will fall. There's going to be sunrises and sunsets. In relative terms, I don't expect industries to disappear. I don't think that there are sunset industries, only sunset technologies. There will be new technologies that step in to continue to develop those industries. A big key will be in identifying the technology of the future. And companies that fail to do that may be eliminated. That's all I'll say. Now, our next speaker, I'd like to ask President Ma, originally the president of China Merchants Bank, and grew it from several hundred billion to several trillion in assets. Now, if we look at China's GDP, a lot of people get it wrong. They say there's no technology in the Chinese GDP. The GDP is technology light. So I ask you, President Ma, if we want to increase the share of technology in the Chinese GDP, what should we be doing? Just now, as people were entering, I saw a book by the entrance, published by Chairman Schwab of the World Economic Forum. It was called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is upon us. And China, just as the rest of the world, is faced with a big change. Population aging. Of course, there's other factors as well. But the cost advantage that emerging markets enjoyed for so long, using lower cost of labor to push development in the emerging economies, that is reducing. At the same time, technology revolutions are increasing productivity and reducing the lifespan of companies. The average lifespan of a company on the S&P 500 has gone from 60 years to 18 years. And it's also a shorter cycle of period in which a single company can control an industry. For example, Google took control of the search market in only 5 years, whereas legacy companies spent decades building their markets. So it's going to be more important to use technology, not cheap labor, to fuel development. And this requires structural change. China has a very large economy. It's the second largest in the world. But our Achilles heel is very clear. That is a weakness in innovation, and especially the commercialization of technology. Please allow me to interrupt. So, how do you see the relationship between technology and GDP? So there's usually 3 standards for measuring GDP's technology share in GDP. There's R&D investment. We're moving towards $250 million. Sorry, 2.5%, and whereas in Israel, for example, it's over 4%. Second is the commercialization of technology, the deployment. Some countries can achieve 80%, as high as 80%. We're much smaller. And the third is the contribution of technology to GDP. We're below 50%. Some countries reach 90%. So we still have quite far to go. So it's not to say we should be too focused on whether China's GDP is a point higher or a point lower. The point is not quantity, it's about quality. The competitiveness is in the quality of your GDP growth. And my view is that technology and innovation will increase that competitiveness, especially in manufacturing. I think there's going to be a lot more smart machines, more automation, more networkization of manufacturing that's going to power us forward in this 4th industrial revolution. And again, the Achilles heel. And I mean, if we think back to the Greek myth of Achilles and his fatal flaw, if we fail in raising the technology quality of GDP, then that will be fatal for us as well. So that's very important. Thank you. Now let's talk a little bit more about industrial upgrade. And we talked about commercialization and deployment. Now I'd like to move to the chairman of Tsinghua Holdings, Mr. Xu, and you're all familiar with Tsinghua. It's one of China's most respected academic institutions, university. But tell us about how Tsinghua is taking the research and turning it or commercializing it into valuable technology products. We'll ask Mr. Xu to introduce that, and then we'll ask Mr. Wang, formerly from Xintiandi, who is the former chairman of Xintiandi, and then moving to China Mobile, and we'll also be speaking about industry upgrade. But let's begin with Mr. Chairman Xu. Hello. So we're speaking today about China's new business context. Now, I will just make a note or two. The core of economic institutional reform is the relationship between the market and the government. How to allow markets to play a decisive role in allocating resources, and that will determine the future development of China. So Chinese entrepreneurs, I believe, are some of the wisest in the world. They're very creative entrepreneurs, but the market and legal frameworks in which they operate often don't allow them to put into play their greatest potential. And that's a core issue.
Because at the moment, I thought that the entrepreneurs are not confident enough. This is a major issue or a major challenge. What do you mean by not adequate confidence? Well, I think this is about the overall market environment. And also because China is in the transitioning period. So for entrepreneurs, I believe they need two environments. One is a fairly transparent and a fair environment. And another environment is a legal environment where the law is enforced. Yesterday, I attended the workshop and I was informed that many business people in China are not so certain about the future. Now we have the new leadership, and the new leadership has proposed to streamline the administrative requirements and to delegate more powers to the provincial level and also to the market. I think this is the right direction. Furthermore, we need to see globalization and also industrialization. So these general trends have posed new requirements to companies. They should be able to adapt themselves to the new trends. Now we're in the industrial period, and this is really a new period for mankind. Talking about information technology or the information age, we're still in early days of the information age, even though the IT has already ushered in fundamental changes to our life and our work. A few years ago, there were hot words like to change fundamentally the world and the society. For companies, I think it is necessary for them to have constant creation or innovation to be adapted to the changing world. In Tsinghua, especially in our company, we have developed ourselves into a major shareholding company with over 300 billion RMB yuan worth of assets. But you get your asset or your value from Tsinghua, your R&D in Tsinghua, right? Well, of course, the R&D force or strength in Tsinghua is one of our key strengths. And for my company, we are actually a business company and we want to translate the research findings into commercial products. I think everyone should do his own or her own business well. For companies like us, we wish ourselves to be a company focusing on constant innovation and can translate the research findings or the scientific development into commercial products and technologies. Globalization has made companies in the world, starting from its first day, to be faced with competition. For Google, for Didi, and name whatever the company you can think of, you will see that the business environment is constantly changing. That's why companies should constantly change their mindsets. We can have technological innovation. However, we also need to have innovation in terms of the mindset. Companies should be faced with the constantly changing phenomena and they should be able to adapt themselves to the changing environment. Great. Now, talking about the industrial upgrade, since 2000 or up to 2008 and 2009, because of WTO or because of urbanization, China used to be the world factory. China enjoyed low labor cost and also the low price of the land. So China became the world factory. However, a few years ago, China lost such advantage. Then, with industrialization, it is really necessary for China to accomplish the industrial upgrade. However, industrial upgrade is not so easy. I used to visit Samsung, and I found that Samsung invested 20 billion US dollars every year in R&D, and among the employee or among the staff, a large proportion of the staff are people in R&D. And the company allocates a large sum of money for R&D input. Well, Mr. Wang, maybe you can comment on China's industrial upgrade. How can China achieve such upgrade? I really like the topic. Talking about the upgrade of the manufacturing sector, we always say that the economic downturn has affected the manufacturing upgrade, and also many of the factories are moved to Southeast Asian countries where the labor cost is less expensive. But I want to give you an example, that is the mobile handset production or the mobile phone production, because I used to work for China Mobile, so I'm very interested in the production of the mobile phones. Well, we found a very encouraging phenomena, that is the production of mobile phones in China is not deteriorating. Instead, we have more concentrated or centralized production of mobile phones. Let me share with you some data. Last year, we produced in China 1.8 billion mobile phones. Among the total mobile phone produced, the smartphones numbered 1.4 billion. And also, the production technology has been upgraded. Also, in the world, 80% of the smartphones are produced in China, and this proportion is increasing year by year. We've made some studies, and we tried to find the reasons for such encouraging growth. We found that the supply side reform might be a very important reason. You know that in past years, even though the mobile phones were so-called produced in China, actually the value created in the production process were reaped by international companies. We only produced the spare parts or the components, and the assembly was not accomplished in China. That's why the value created in the production process were reaped by international companies. However, the situation has changed. Now, in China, we have a very sound supply chain, and more importantly, we have created a sound ecosystem for mobile phones. From the R&D of the chips to the supply of the screens, they can all be accomplished in China. We have such a sound ecosystem. Also, for the razor carving and all the technologies required to produce good mobile phones are all owned in China, and also we have created the sound ecosystem. We can now produce the screens by ourselves, and also for the semiconductor processing. In the past, it was done by international companies, and they were not done in China. But now, the world major semiconductor companies are establishing factories in China. And also, we own such technologies. we improve the existing technologies. So you can see that today, very few people complain about the quality of the mobile phones. So the quality is improved, and the price of the mobile phones is also being reduced. Most of the mobile phones are smartphones. In Yancheng, Jiangsu province, I ran into a mobile phone producer. I was told that the cost of a mobile phone is quite inexpensive now. With 400 RMB yuan, the producer is able to produce a 4G smartphone. If you go to EU or United States, you will find the mobile phones made from China and marketed very well in those international markets. Now, in the past years, we witness a large number of Chinese brands in mobile phones, especially the smartphones. Because of the limited time, I'm not going to elaborate on this phenomena, but I want to make 2 points. The first is the supply chain development and also the ecosystem establishment in China are results of years of efforts. They cannot be accomplished overnight. You can see that the creation of a sound ecosystem needs various participants or stakeholders like engineers, and it's not easy to find so many qualified engineers overnight in one particular place. So you surely need a long time to cultivate the talents and also to train the skills. Also, I didn't mention software, and now I want to highlight the software. Software is not just about the operation systems in the mobile phones. If you just focus on the operation system, now we only have the iOS system and the Windows system. Now people are talking about redefining the smartphones. However, I believe that the operation system holds the success factor to the mobile or smartphones. That's why I always emphasize to my peers that they should focus on the operation system. Sometimes they cannot understand my point. They thought that mobile phones are faced with severe competitions. But according to my observation, if you want to create a really successful smartphone and to avoid the heterogeneity in the mobile phones, you have to focus on the development of a new operation system. That's why I encourage all the capable mobile phone producers to invest more in the R&D of the operation system. Then you will have groundbreaking technology and create a groundbreaking mobile phone product. I'm sorry, let me add a few data, macroeconomic data to support Mr. Wang. First, China's R&D investment ranks the second in the world. Even though it is only 2% of the GDP, still it accounts for a large share. Who's the biggest investor? Of course, United States. My second point is that China enjoys a rich resource of R&D talents. We have 4 million R&D talents. And every year, the universities graduates a large number of college graduates, students, and the majority of them are in the science majors. So China really enjoys abundant resources in R&D. That's why international companies are very optimistic about the Chinese market, and also they try to attract the R&D talents from China. Well, for R&D, actually, the Chinese developers, or R&D talents are competing against those from the developed countries.
And finally, we've also seen a number of our enterprises be successful in their R&Ds. 3 of the top 10 patent applicants worldwide are Chinese. And I understand Tsinghua Holdings also has a number of patents, yes? Of the 10 largest patent acquirers in the world, 3 of them are in China. So there is a record, there are conditions for technology to support China's industrial transformation, but we need reform. We need more protection of intellectual property, technology finance reform, the ownership reform in the state-owned sector. Maybe Vice President Long could fill in a little bit here. Over the past decade or so, has the path towards transformation been smooth? Well, look, this transformation is a process. If we look back at the past 10 years, we've already made a lot of progress. For example, in mobile devices. Yeah, and we see that in other industries as well. We see a higher proportion of services, and you could go into a particular segment of the economy, for example, manufacturing, and look at how technology is being deployed, the patents acquired. And so over the past 10 years, there has been progress. But our ambition is even greater. So that often makes us feel dissatisfied with the progress we've made. We say, why can't this go faster? We want to do so much more. We want to go do more faster. But the truth is, speaking globally, China is one of the fastest technological and industrial transformations in history. Okay? Now, just now, our guests have spoken about the industrial sector and transformation there. And China is also very noticeable for the development of new economies. And we have a leader from that sector, Zhen, the Chief China Strategy Officer from Uber. At this point, I almost never drive a car myself. I'm on the street, and if I need a car, I call one. And so this is a new economy business. And of course, her cousin, who heads Didi Chuxing, together, they have completely disrupted the traditional taxicab industry. So I wonder whether Ms. Liu would speak to us a little bit about your experience in the disruptive new economy. Hello, I'm Zhen from Uber, and it's really an honor to be here with my seniors and sharing with you all my experience with the online ride-calling service development. Now, just now, earlier in the forum, our founder talked about we are moving towards a shared economy. And who does that impact? If we're sharing cars instead of owning cars, it hits the automakers, right? Automakers used to have a driver's seat and then a passenger seat in the front. Now, there's new trends that are affecting how cars are designed. For example, new energy, or cars that are designed for ride sharing. Now, 10 to 15% of cities are made up of parking lots, but if we have a sharing economy, we may not need that. For example, in San Francisco, where our company's based, there are less and less parking lots being built in new properties. And so the impact of this disruptive technology in ride-sharing also impacts architecture, for example, real estate development, as well as insurance. How will insurance companies respond to these differences? Or smart devices. A lot of people now leave the house without their wallets. All of their money is digital. And with Uber or with Didi, you can pay for your transport directly online, digitally. No cash needed. And so this is a big change. Last month, our first autonomous driver, our autonomous vehicle was deployed in Pittsburgh. Now, if these achieve scale, we'll see significant benefits in road safety. Right? See kids all the time who it's possible to imagine that in future children will ask parents, "Mom, what's a green light? What's a red light?" They won't be necessary in a world of driverless cars. So technology is the future. It's unstoppable. The question is, how can we embrace these technologies, not feel disrupted by them? So Uber, for example, is a platform that has also transformed the traditional employment model. Recently, there's been a report on employment that surveyed thousands of drivers, of Uber drivers in China, and found that most of them chose to do this job because of the flexibility in their work styles, that they could rest when they wanted to rest, which is something that in modern society is really important. Also, they found that 26% of the drivers on the platform had been let go by their former employers. They were formerly unemployed, laid off workers. And so our platform offers an opportunity for employment to this segment of the workforce. So I think technology is bringing with it these trends that are, again, unstoppable. And the goal is to not be disrupted by these trends, but to embrace them. Well, I think you've made a good point there. We've been talking about supply-side reform, structural reform, and a big issue is what do we do with all those workers that are laid off? Now, there might be millions of former workers that lose their place, that are displaced by these reforms, and perhaps platforms like Uber can be a solution, part of the solution. How many drivers do you have? Worldwide, we have 400 cities in 70 countries. We have 60 cities in China. And are you continuing to expand? Yes. We're going to expand into third and fourth tier cities in China. And we find we're even more welcome there, because they have a lot of employment problems there. There's a lot of not saturated employment markets. And the market has been cultivated to this point. People are ready to accept kind of ride calling. And so we find in the third and fourth tier cities, we expect to develop even faster. Now, Vice President Long, from the DRC's perspective, the Development Research Center's perspective, are we using? They're not. This seems pretty good, right? You can have millions or thousands of laid-off workers. All they have to do is drive a car. They don't need new skills. They don't need to be retrained. That's pretty good, right? Maybe you'll write a note of support to the State Council. Okay. Now, I think we should turn it over to a more interactive phase, and we'll take questions a bit. But I'd like to ask Mr. Ni from Fesco Adecco. Now, this is a typical service industry from the service industry, as we see China moving from the agricultural economy to an industrial economy to a service economy. What's your experience been? Hello. I'm from Fesco Adecco. This is a domestic talent and human resources company. And we have a JV in Shanghai. The human resources services industry touches the entire economy. And I think it's very critical that we noted the agricultural revolution took 3,000 years. Industrial revolution took 300 years. Industrial revolution took 30 years. And they're having increasingly profound effects on our society. Just now, Ms. Liu noted Uber, or depending on how you pronounce it in China, Youbu. Our company works for Didi. Didi is an important client for us. But I know that it's all in the family, right? You're all cousins. But when we talk about this disruption, we look towards, in the past, we looked towards longer-term collaboration in human resources employment. Now we're looking at short-term or part-time employment. So the demands made on us now are for many more shorter-time workers. We never imagined, as a kind of third party, that, in fact, Didi didn't just disrupt the taxi market. It disrupted human resources market. As Mr. Ma noted, it disrupts the financial sector. A bank might have over 200,000 employees, and they get paid at the same time every month. Now, if we're paying a distributed network of freelancers, it's a much different system. The payroll becomes very different. Now, maybe instead of going to banks to settle payrolls, companies will pay over Zhifubao, over Alipay. And so our company is kind of on the sidelines watching and collaborating in this. And one of my favorite cases is from a TV show called The Dream Comes Home. And it was sponsored by Li Bang. He comes from a kind of furniture lacquer business, painting and lacquers. And his business has moved almost entirely online. So I've used it. I've used this service as well. It's a kind of on-demand painting and delivery service. And they will paint or lacquer your walls. And they can bring a whole team. So it's not just a product company anymore. Now it's the entire services. And so when we talk about industrial transformation and transition, it's happening all around us. And from Fesco's perspective, it's happening to all of our clients. Now, in the services industry, as we move from industrials to services, this is also really an unstoppable transition. But it's also interesting how the line is blurring between our clients that are industrials or are they service companies. It's sometimes difficult to say. And sometimes in an industrials company, the number of employees engaged in service are over 65%. And that number has risen very, very quickly sometimes, from 15% to 60% over.
So I believe that many people will move from the industry to the service sector. Actually, in this process, we have some concern. Our biggest concern is that today you will find a lot of real estate agents standing outside the gates of the residential areas. Well, actually, for service, we have productive type and the consumption type. We are at the moment serving a lot of production type employees or staff, while the consumption type now represents only 15% of the total labor force, but this percentage is 50% in the United States. And I believe that in the future we should have more consumption type service providers. So what is your biggest concern? Well, my concern is about the real estate agents. Now we have so many so-called agents, but they are not professionals. And I do hope that China can develop more professionals. Well, talking about real estate, I believe that the agents in the future are not selling the apartments or houses. Instead, they should provide services about real estate property. Yes, indeed, they should provide solutions rather than the products. I think this is a very remarkable trend. Okay, we've had every speaker add their view. Now the floor is open for questions and comments. I think we do have some time for Q&A or for comments sharing. On the first row, please. Thank you. I'm from the new media. I have a question for Mr. Xu from Tsinghua Holdings. Just now, many of you touched upon the upgrading of the traditional manufacturing sector. However, manufacturing is a broad area. Just now, you mentioned the smartphone production, the banking sector. However, for the manufacturing in China, some of them do not require many technologies, and they only generate little value, like the garment production. So, in the industrial upgrading, I believe that the role of the human beings is getting more and more important. Mr. Xu and your Tsinghua Holdings company is surely a company enjoying a lot of human resources, and also you are very interested in creating or in generating such human talents. Could you please elaborate on how you cultivate the talents? Well, this is about education, and I believe that education in China should undergo profound changes or reforms. I found that the traditional Chinese way of education did not pay enough attention to the individuality. Students sit for exams, and there are so many standard answers. Everyone is expected to write down the standard answer. As you know, that even before the conclusion of the World War II, Harvard University proposed the general education. I believe that the individuality and the creativity of the young should be well cultivated in our education system. We should respect the individuality. Secondly, we need to cultivate the will, the determination, and the cultural aspects, or the general competence of the students. These are challenges for the existing education system in China. However, I'm very confident in the Generation Y. I can see, one of my children is from the generation Y. I can see that this generation has a very broad spectrum. Their knowledge is even richer than us. I'm confident in them, and I also believe that the existing Chinese education system should be reformed. I know that such educational reform cannot be accomplished overnight, but I'm confident that with globalization, with the emergence of the technologies, especially IT technologies, and the internet based education or online education, for instance, we now have the open courses. In Tsinghua University, there are also many open courses offered on the internet. I'm sure this will change the education fundamentally. I always say that I'm an open person. My kid did not want to go to college after his senior high school years. So I agreed and let him do whatever he wanted. And then in 2 years, he wanted to go to United States for college. And then now he returns from United States and he started his own business. I always encourage him. Well, just now we talked about the open courses. If I remember correctly, there are such phenomena like MOOC. It is said that with MOOC in the future, universities, eminent universities like Harvard, Yale, would be gradually disappear because people can gain access to MOOC, to the online open courses. So universities are no longer necessary. Yes, we can have online and offline experiences. Now we do have such online and offline experiences, and I'm sure that people need not only online experience but also offline experiences. That's why I believe that universities will always be there, but they need to be reformed. Okay, the lady, please. Uh, Good afternoon. I'm from Sohu. Sohu. I'm from Sohu. I have a question about the private sector. Now, many private companies are going into the financial sector and they want to start financial businesses. Is that because the current environment for them is not so good, so they move to the financial sector? Well, I think this is such movement or the entering of the private companies into the financial sector is necessary and is a natural trend because the financial sector may provide better returns on investment. They can make more profits. So, companies always seek profits. Also, some people believe that once they are in the financial sector, they can have easier access to capital. Also, it seems to me that the bankers are more respected than the factory managers in the society. Well, this is just my personal perception. Furthermore, the state government has provided more policies allowing the private sector to be engaged in the financial sector. I think this is conducive. This can eliminate the monopoly of the SOEs in the financial sector. However, at the same time, we also need to see that the financial sector is a business sector, and you cannot always expect high returns in this sector. In the past, the banks were very profitable, but now these high profit days have gone. Also, in the past, banks were well protected by the policies. But now, such protective measures are gradually eliminated. So the financial sector itself, I believe, is serving the society and serving all the economic entities. The financial sector is not just limited to the state assets. So the entrance of the private sector in the financial sector, it is something that we should take naturally and even encourage the private capital in the financial sector because they can help to break the monopoly in the sector. Okay, next question or comments. Thank you. I have a question. I'm from the new energy sector. We have at the moment I have a question. I have a question for Mr. Ma. Just now, many of the panelists mentioned that the industrial upgrade is actually to provide solutions to the consumers or to the customers. So, how can the central government create an enabling environment for such upgrade? This is my question for Mr. Lou. My second question is, in this upgrading process, companies need to get that financial support. However, banks focused on the safety of their assets. So, are there any potential financial policies that can encourage the industrial upgrade? Well, I'm not very clear about your question. Well, for local governments, they are implementing those policies developed by the central government. You know, policies are developed by the central governments. And the local governments should implement the central policies. To me, the local governments should not issue policies against the central policies. Instead, they should implement the policies developed by the central government. So for local governments, I think they should have the capacity to fully understand the policies developed by the central government. As you may have already observed, in the past years, the central government has worked out many policies. So for the local governments, I believe the first thing to do is to understand the policy intentions of the central government. Then the local governments should implement or enforce the central government policies. And the third is the motivation for the local governments. Well, as you may see, the public servants these days are quite different from their predecessors. They are having a lot of concerns. They may be able to understand the policy intentions. They may want to enforce the policies, but they don't know how to, and they are afraid of making mistakes. That's why the central government has emphasized the capacity of execution. That means to execute the policies or to implement the policies. This is fairly complicated, and I believe this involves the motivation system or incentives to the civil servants or to the public servants. And also, maybe we can ask a follow-up question. What has caused the public servants, what has prevented them from enforcing the policies and the regulations? Well, you can see that the local governments are competing against each other. If they can win the competition, the local officials may be able to be promoted. And also, the local government may be able to enjoy some rewards. I believe that the task to do is to change or to improve the incentive mechanism for the public servants. the central government has emphasized the incentives to the scientists, to the R&D, and to the public servants. Yes, indeed. You know that in an Oriental society like ours, the role of the public servants is very important. So, Mr. Low, so your point is it is necessary to improve the incentive mechanism for the public servants. Now, the next question is about how companies get lendings from the banking sector. Yes, this is a perception from the people that banks are only ready to offer loans to companies in good shape. I think the market is improving. However, you should also understand that banks are also having their headaches. For banks, they take savings and they give lendings. They generate their profits from the interest difference. So banks are also faced with risks. For SMEs, for those growing companies, banks are concerned. Actually, it is not that banks are not willing to provide lendings to SMEs. Indeed, if banks provide lendings to SMEs, they can save 25% of their capital. However, for lendings to SMEs, the due diligence, the potential risks involved have made it the lending to SME more expensive and more risky. That's why in the society, it is necessary to establish a sound mechanism so that banks can be brave enough to give lendings to SMEs. Well, let me be very straightforward. If you don't have asset, if you don't have any mortgage, you won't be able to get any lending from the banks. Well, now banks are trying to reduce their business risks and while better serving the companies. Also, I would say that the financing has a lot of approaches. Bank lending is only one of them. For example, in the United States, bank lending only accounts for 30% of the financing. Well, if you want to get lendings from the banks, you have to prove to the banks that it is not risky. So I believe it's necessary to establish a risk investment mechanism or system in the society. So my proposal is to develop risk investment in China. That will help us to address a lot of problems. Okay, it's almost time, so we have to stop here. Let's thank our panelists with a big round of applause.